It has been 5 seasons of The Boys, and Antony Starr still has not received an Emmy for his immaculate performance as the infamous character Homelander. And at this point, I don't know what else this man has to do. Does he need to actually fly into the Emmy building with glowing red eyes and personally ask them what they're waiting for? Because, brother, I am being so serious when I say this. Homelander is one of the best television villains of the modern era, and Antony Starr is the biggest reason why. He has been the lead character of The Boys since 2019, carrying the entire show on his back. And without Homelander, I bet you the show would not be where it's at today at all. Sure, there are definitely other great performances from The Boys that keep you entertained, like Karl Urban as Butcher and Jensen Ackles as Soldier Boy, and so much more. But the reason so many of these characters work so well is because Homelander is in the picture. He is the reason every single scene has this weird tension in the background, even when he's not physically there. And when you have a character that is that interesting, played by someone who can literally tap into the mindset of comic book Homelander and somehow make him even feel more disturbing in live action, that is when you start to really get hooked. Now, of course, The Boys show does not directly take from the comics page by page, and that is probably for the better in a lot of areas. The writing in the comics is pretty iffy, but one thing they never really changed was the core of Homelander. The narcissism, the need to be loved, and the complete lack of empathy is completely spot on in the show. Homelander in the comics was a self-centered, narcissistic monster who cared more about his public image than anything else. And again, even though the comic writing was not always the best, Antony Starr perfectly embodied what Homelander would feel like if he were to be real. And that is what makes his performance so insane, because there are countless scenes in The Boys where you can feel genuine fear, disgust, or secondhand embarrassment when Homelander is on screen. And these emotions you feel tell you the actor is doing exactly what he's supposed to do. If he makes you feel uncomfortable or makes you nervous every time he walks into a room, that is not just the writing, that is the performance. Now, for instance, this scene I like so much, even though it might not be like a viral moment from the show, for some reason I feel terrified if I put myself in Firecracker's position in this scene. But then, if I'm watching it from a viewer's perspective, I also kind of burst out in laughing to cope just because the scene is so insane. So it is the scene where Firecracker starts coughing because, the medication she is taking to produce breast milk for Homelander is giving her heart palpitations. And Homelander just looks at her with absolute disgust. He just looks completely irritated that she would dare cough near him, and that she is interrupting him because, she's sick, for crying out loud. Dude, have some empathy, man.
You're coughing all over me. It's disgusting. Go further down. Scoot.
And when he tells her to go further down and says, scoot, bro, those line deliveries were so raw. They genuinely felt so real. And that is brilliance. Not because it's his biggest scene, but because it shows you that even his smaller scenes are still layered. Antony Starr does not waste a single second of screen time. The way his face drops immediately in the scene when he finds out she's sick is just hilarious. To the way he can make one simple word sound funny and horrifying at the same time. That is what separates a good performance from an award-worthy performance. And that brings me to one of the biggest reasons he deserves an Emmy: the emotional range. People always talk about Homelander being scary, and yes, of course, he is terrifying, no doubt, but Antony Starr is not just giving us fear. He is giving us so many emotions that you wouldn't expect a villain to possess, such as comedy, sadness, insecurity, arrogance, rage, literally practically everything. And sometimes all of these emotions in the same scene. That is extremely difficult to do without making the character feel inconsistent. But with Homelander, it works because Antony Starr understands that all of these emotions are connected. And one of the craziest parts is that Antony Starr can make Homelander sympathetic for like half a second, then immediately remind you why we should never feel bad for him at all. Do you guys remember that scene where Homelander was talking to Dr. Vogelbaum? I kind of felt bad for him because Vogelbaum was one of the only father figures he had growing up, and he just outright says, "You are my biggest failure." Like, he never had a real childhood, and when the show explores that, you can see the pain in him. But then, right when you start thinking, whoa, maybe I should feel a little bad for this guy. You know, his upbringing was absolutely horrific. Then he does something so absurd that you remember, oh, okay, this guy definitely should not be excused for his past at all. Homelander also has become more than just a character in a show. He has become parts of internet culture. Now, there are so many Homelander memes at this point that even people who have never watched The Boys at all have completely seen his face somewhere. The scene where he breathes out has been used in so many memes that it basically became the internet's way of showing someone trying not to crash out. And that is the power of his performance. A lot of actors have good scenes, but not every actor has facial expressions that become a universal reaction meme. It's kind of like the I Showed Speed in the world of live streaming. He has so many memes of his facial reactions, and he's already won Streamer of the Year. So after The Boys Season 5, which by the way has given us more memes, Antony Starr should be on the road to an Emmy. And yes, memes can be funny, but they also prove something important. They prove that people are connecting with the character beyond just watching the episode once and then moving on. Because let's be honest, the internet does not meme boring characters like that. The characters who become memes are usually the ones with the strongest screen presence. You can take one screenshot of Antony Starr's face, put no context around it, and people already know the emotion. That is not just good writing, that is purely acting. Another thing I want to talk about is how he plays Homelander's public persona versus, his real personality. Because Antony Starr is basically playing two characters at the same time. He is playing Homelander, and then he is playing Homelander pretending to be a good person. Public Homelander is patriotic and always says the right things, but the real Homelander is underneath all of that, and you can always see him leaking through the cracks. And that is such a specific acting challenge. He has to act like someone who is acting. So Antony Starr has to show us the fake version and the real version at the same time. That is why the character feels so layered. He is not just playing evil Superman, he is playing a product, a celebrity, and a cult leader. Another thing that deserves credit is how Antony Starr keeps Homelander interesting after 5 seasons. That is not easy at all. A lot of villains are scary for one reason, maybe 2, and then after that, you kind of know their tricks. But Homelander somehow feels even more dangerous now than he did when the show started. And he has V1. So yeah, he's kind of unstoppable. And that is because Antony Starr has evolved the performance. Season 1 Homelander was more controlled, and that is because Antony Starr has evolved the performance. And another reason the Emmy conversation is so frustrating is because if this exact same performance was in, like a serious crime drama or a psychological thriller, people would have been begging for him to win awards years ago. But because The Boys has superheroes and insane moments that are kind of pretty graphic, people act like the show is somehow less serious. But that makes no sense to me. If anything, playing Homelander might be harder because the tone of The Boys is just so wild. And one more specific thing that I just want to mention is his chemistry with literally every single character. Now, Homelander changes depending on who he is talking to, and that's what makes the performance even more real. With Butcher, there is hatred, but it also is this weird respect because Butcher doesn't fear him and is actively trying to kill him, and he respects that. Then a total 360 with Soldier Boy because, you see this desperate son where Homelander just wants approval from his daddy so much. So when people say Antony Starr deserves an Emmy, it is not just because fans like Homelander, it is because the performance has had real impact and has made scenes go viral. And in the wrong hands, this character would be laughable. But Antony Starr made him one of the most compelling villains on television. Antony Starr does not just play Homelander, he disappears into him and makes you forget you are watching an actor. He makes you feel like this narcissistic, broken superhero actually exists somewhere in the world. And if that is not Emmy worthy, then I genuinely don't know what is, man.